And it's a Friday night, and you know exactly where you need to be to get a roundup of all that's happened on the political landscape. Coming to you live from our Randburg studios in Johannesburg, I'm Ziyanda Ngcobo, and you're watching the latest edition of Your Week in Politics.
You use code to settle the political differences. I am not scared of prison, neither am I scared of death. When I joined the struggle, I knew 3 things might happen to me.
The leader of the EFF is facing strong headwinds as he tries to prove to the East London Magistrate's Court that he shouldn't face jail time for firearm-related charges. Julius Malema's pre-trial hearing got underway on Friday, where his ability to show of remorse or lack thereof could be what ensures that he still has a political future.
If the customary marriage is out of community of property with an ANC, the civil marriage will not be in community of property. It will be out of community of property in accordance with the ANC, which regulates the parties' marriage. The converse would also, of course, be true.
South Africa's apex court has ruled that you cannot get a prenup once you've already entered into a customary marriage. This judgment, handed down on Wednesday, has so many consequences for many couples out there. I'll have analysis on that shortly.
What happened was that we did raise with China the issue of Iran, and said that it would be best that they should withdraw and not participate.
And President Cyril Ramaphosa has distanced South Africa from rubber-stamping a decision to have Iran participate in the sea phase of the recent Will for Peace naval exercises. The pre-sentencing in Julius Malema's firearm case has been postponed to the 15th of April after both the defense and the state made submissions in court today. Malema was earlier convicted on all counts relating to the unlawful possession and discharge of a firearm. The defense called for a social worker for mitigation. For more now, let's cross to our Sipakema, who is coming to us live from East London this evening. A very good evening to you, Sipakema. Let's just get a roundup of what's happened today. Have we gotten a sense of whether or not the EFF leader is remorseful tonight?
Well, that was one of the questions that were raised by the state, but also mentioned by the social workers, that was brought in by the defense in order to be part of the mitigation of pre-sentencing, speaking to Malema's character, but also where Malema is needed within his community and various projects giving back to disadvantaged communities as well as to the political party and including his family, basically painting a picture of what life would be without Malema and why he's needed outside, and basically trying to speak to the state wanting maximum sentence for Julius Malema. Now, the maximum would carry 15 years, but the crux of it, Ziyanda, by the social worker was to say that in overall, she does not think that serving time would actually make sense in this. This is what she said to the court regarding that.
We want a fair sentence, and that is for the court to decide. We don't want Mr. Malema to be punished just because he's Mr. Malema. We want to see equality before the law. If this was you or I who had discharged that firearm in that space, we would have already finished serving our prison sentence, because we don't have the finances and the contacts to interfere in cases and drag them on for more than 7 years. You have to remember that when AfriForum laid these charges, we laid the charges because the South African Police Service or the NPA were not acting on the issue. A month later, we said, okay, well, now we have to lay charges because nothing's happening. Then it took a few years for the NPA where they couldn't decide whether they wanted to prosecute or not, and AfriForum had to bring a mandamus application to force them to make a decision. So that's clearly political interference.
What I am concluding is that jail may not be the necessary approach to go. There is a reason that there are fines. The Act prescribes the fines, and one can then argue that every person who can afford it can pay their way out of jail, where it is one of the allowed options within the Firearms Control Act for these contraventions.
Well, you also heard from Jacques Broodryk from AfriForum. Now, AfriForum are the ones that came forward and laid the charge against Malema. As you heard Jacques talking about how they saw the NPA as well as SAPS was not going forward after those videos, that video rather that was trending on social media showed what seemed to be Julius Malema firing a rifle in the air during the EFF's 5th anniversary, talking about that they want a fair sentence, but not really saying what that fair sentence should be, but saying that what would happen if it was an ordinary South African.
And I mean, Sipakema, you know, one of the key things here is how Malema is sentenced, because if it is for more than 12 months or he gets a fine, this could have an implication as to whether or not he is able to continue being a member of parliament, and by implication his political future under fire.
Absolutely, which is why he had even stated during the judgment that they will be appealing, but at first they wanted to go through mitigation and the whole pre-sentencing procedure, and thereafter hear what the sentence would be, and then, but mentioning, of course, making it quite clear, as Ziyanda, that they will be seeking an appeal to the conviction of all the 5 charges brought against him. Now, you mentioned that how this could have an effect, more especially should he then be sentenced to more than 12 months or more of life imprisonment, imprisonment. That could be a problem, as he would not be able to stay on as a member of the National Assembly, and that means not being able to lead his political party there and Parliament.
And Sipa, let's also talk about some of what happened outside. I mean, I know for a good portion of the day you were inside court listening to proceedings, but there also seemed to be running battles between officials and EFF members. Can you just tell us what exactly might have been happening there? The EFF clearly showing their force and their might with those numbers today.
Well, certainly, I mean, if I were to show you what probably most where the buses are parked, Ziyanda, looks like, they've literally painted East London red as everywhere that you can see, road closures as well, bringing the most busiest streets in East London, Fleet Street, or one of the busiest streets behind me called Fleet Street, to a complete stall, but also Buffalo Street, where the court is, really, they've shut it down. But when talking about those officials that you are mentioning, Ziyanda, this dates back to even 2022, 2023, the on and off issues that the court, or rather the magistrate, as well as Julius Malema had, where you had the magistrate at some point where she had spoken about the delays being a problem, but at the same time you had Malema at some point also having an issue with the lateness, or rather the delay of the start time of court over the weeks when the trial had just started. Those are some of the issues, but also not forgetting that moment where the defense attorneys had actually requested for Magistrate Toinette Olivier to recuse herself, stating that she was biased, where there was the one witness, a state witness, saying that she was coaching that witness and making the testimony easier for that witness, where Malema even stood up at some point, Ziyanda, saying that you've already prosecuted me, you're assisting in prosecuting, and you've already laid a judgment before even hearing all the evidence that has been brought before this court. Now, that was in 2022. Also trying to get the matter rolled off the court's roll as well, saying that the state has insufficient evidence. Now, that has been the back and forth between, and also today, especially during that cross-examination where Magistrate Toinette Olivier seemed to try and poke holes in the testimony that was made by the social worker, asking what the unique circumstances around Julius Malema's upbringing or background or growing up disadvantaged, how unique is it to everyday South Africans, but also speaking about the contribution he makes in society or in communities, such as the soup kitchen, saying that you're telling me about the soup kitchen, but what's so special about the soup kitchen that can't continue with him when he is in prison?
It's going to be a very interesting road towards the 15th of April when that pre-sentencing resumes. Sipha Kema coming to us live from East London tonight. Thank you very much. She was in court monitoring all of those proceedings. All right, so when we come back, we're going to talk about that very consequential Constitutional Court judgment. Perhaps you sitting at home are married according to customary law. I think you want to listen very carefully to the conversation that we're going to have with family law specialist Newzroom Afrika. Do stay with us. The Constitutional Court has declared that any antenuptial contracts entered into by a monogamous couple already in a customary marriage are invalid. This majority judgment, penned by Justice Stephen Majid, was handed down on Wednesday. He ruled that despite amendments to the Marriage Act allowing for customary marriages to be converted to civil unions, this does not undo matrimonial property agreements entered into prior to the customary marriage. Now, according to Majid, the recognition of the Customary Marriages Act, signed into law 26 years ago, was meant to give customary marriages the same importance as civil unions.
If the customary marriage is out of community of property with an ANC, the civil marriage will not be in community of property. It will be out of community of property in accordance with the ANC, which regulates the parties' marriage. The converse would also, of course, be true.
Joining us now in our Randburg studios is family law specialist Newzroom Afrika. Very good evening to you, Ms. Kumalo, and thanks for joining us in studio. I mean, I think it's important to, in a very simple way, explain the effect of this judgment. I've seen a lot of misinformation and different interpretations of this judgment because of the changes in the recognition of Marriages Act. So in simple terms, what does this judgment mean?
Evening, Ziyanda, how are you? So in simple terms, basically, this judgment states, or it reiterates what the recognition of Customary Marriage Act states, which is we hold customary marriages to the same effect and to the same legal principle as civil marriages. The miscommunication or the misunderstanding that people tend to have had in the past is that, yes, you go there, you pay lobola, and then you can then sign and enter into an anti-nuptial agreement. However, with the Act coming in 1998, it basically stated that customary marriages are held to the same standard as civil marriages. So therefore, before you even go pay that lobola, you had to have entered into your anti-nuptial agreement, because if you do it after, then it's invalid. And the default system for all customary marriages is in community of property.
Yes.
So you're automatically married in community of property in the absence of an anti-nuptial agreement, which is the same for civil marriages.
So this is very interesting, because then what happens to those people or couples that are currently in a customary marriage? They did not get an anti-nuptial contract. And now we've had this judgment handed down. In essence, if I wanted to convert my customary marriage to a civil one and I want to be out of community of property, does this mean I need to get divorced first and then remarried into a civil union?
Well, that would be the long way to do it, but no. Section 21 of the Matrimonial Property Act basically gives us recourse. So you would have to then apply to the court, and then the court would then have to be satisfied that both parties consented to this, and you've given your creditors enough time and notice that you wish to change the regime in which you're in. So like I said, it would be the same, because even if you were married under civil marriages, you would still have to go through that same process of changing the regime that you are married under.
And I mean, then it becomes even more curious for those. So in essence, you're saying if you decide to choose, you know, a customary marriage, an anti-nuptial contract is best to do upfront and before because it has the same weighting as a civil union.
Yes.
And so if someone is entering into, you know, a polygamous, you know, customary marriage, then an anti-nuptial contract is not valid, surely, because that by automatically is what? That's community of property. How would that work?
It's actually quite an interesting one.
Yeah,
so,
how does that work?
Let's say I'm the first wife and my husband and I have been married, and then he decides that no, now he wants to go the route of polygamy.
Yes.
We then would automatically have to then approach the courts for an application, and then our joint estate would need to be separated before he can enter into the following marriages, which would all be out of community of property. Yes, so as it is, we would then have to separate the unions. We're not getting divorced, no. We're just separating our joint estate that we've had for X amount of years.
As you and the first wife?
As me as the first wife with my husband.
In a customary marriage?
Yes.
And then when you want to add someone else, you then just split the estate?
We split the estate before that person is then added. My spouse would have to do an application to the court stating such.
I want to take a step back a bit. Let's just talk about what exactly led us to this moment, in this case actually going all the way to the apex court, because this emanates from a case between a couple that seem to have differing views about how to change their marriage regime.
So I think the mistake that was made, or perhaps the lack of understanding that a lot of people tend to have, and it's unfortunate that I only have this understanding because I've studied this and this is something that I do day by day. So people have this belief that once you've entered into a customary marriage and now you wish to enter into a civil marriage, the customary marriage then gets dissolved. That's not the case. Section 8 of the Recognition of Marriage, Customary Marriage Act basically states that there are only two ways to dissolve a customary marriage: by death or by divorce decree. So when you are going from one system to the other, you have to dissolve the one that you started with, because it can also be applied retrospectively. So you can go from a civil marriage to a customary marriage, but you have to dissolve the civil first.
Get a divorce.
So, yes. So what this couple failed to do, because this couple got married in 2011, and then they entered into an anti-nuptial agreement in 2019. They failed to dissolve the customary marriage prior to entering into the anti-nuptial agreement, or even approach the court under Section 21, stating that they wish to change their matrimonial property system. So then that's where I think the miscommunication is, and then that's where people like me come into play to come and explain it.
And we're grateful to people like you. I think one of the other things that has been very topical is, so for instance, with the issue of lobola and whether or not it's recognized as a marriage, and different you know, cultures recognizing things differently. For some cultures, lobola is not the final step of marriage, and in other instances it is. And obviously, because now the laws have also spoken about, once you have a celebration, a lobola celebration, that is recognized by the courts as a full wedding celebration. In fact, we've seen that argument being meted out in the case of Black Coffee and his ex-wife.
Yeah, and it's going to continue to play out in the next coming years, because the Recognition of Customary Marriage Act basically states that lobola doesn't even need to be paid. It just needs to be negotiated and celebrated. So these lobola luncheons that we're seeing pop up on social media, that quantifies a celebration. So the Act doesn't stipulate what the celebration should look like. It just needs to be celebrated. And it's very important to note...
Sorry, if there are uncles at my gate, that's it?
You celebrated it. You've negotiated it and celebrated it.
Even if it hasn't been paid?
Yes, I thus have proof that it did take place in the letter. So that's why we always advise people that once you start to think about sending that letter and you know that you do not want to be married in community of property, approach an attorney that would know the steps and that could explain everything to you and break it down for you, so that you have an understanding and you don't find yourself here And now you're in a situation where it's very difficult to get out of. Because, I mean, I speak about the Section 21.
Yeah.
The court process is a lengthy process, especially because your creditors can come in and say, no, we object to this. So now you're stuck, you know, essentially, and now it's a long process that needs to be played out in the South African Court of Law.
Let's hope that couples out there will get services from people like you. Minenhle Khumalo is a family law specialist. A very interesting conversation there. You don't even need to have celebrated or had a lobola luncheon, because by the time that letter is sent and their uncles at the gate, it is considered a marriage. All right, that conversation likely to continue. But to this now, an explosive investigative piece written by News 24 has revealed that Ekurhuleni Mayor Nkosindipile Dr. Xakaza was at the scene of the murder of a DJ, but did not reveal to authorities that he was there on the night in question. Bongani Mfihlo died in a hail of 14 bullets at a Kempton Park club in September 2023, but the case did not progress due to a lack of eyewitnesses, as those who were present feared for their lives. Not only that, the two men responsible for Mfihlo's murder were not only contracted to the Metro to provide security services for the bus rapid transit infrastructure, but one of them has also now been linked to the assassination of Ekurhuleni Chief Auditor Mpho Mafole in June last year. News 24 Sugonati Manjanja explains to our Michelle Craig that Xakaza's presence at the nightclub was only discovered when a different investigating team within the police took over the docket.
For 2 years, the Kempton Park Police, which investigated that murder of Bongani Mfihlo, did not take any statement from Mr. Xakaza and very few witnesses. They actually submitted in the docket that there were no witnesses, as those people who had been present, eyewitnesses, declined to talk to the police, fearing for their lives. And it only emerged in 2025, in July, that Mr. Xakaza, or at least the police, formally got to really make him a person of interest in 2025, when the Serious Crimes and Violent Unit in Gauteng took over the case away from the Kempton Park Police, and realized the mayor had been there, but no one had said a thing about it. And there was no proper gathering of evidence at that time. And of course, when they realized that the mayor had been there, they sought his attention. They tried to take his affidavit. They tried to talk to him. For months, the mayor allegedly stonewalled the police and didn't want to participate or really help them.
Yeah. The issue of eyewitnesses is one thing, because obviously in a case where it seems like there's just been a hit executed on someone, that's speculation. Eyewitnesses, I suppose, would be fearful to come forward. But here we're talking about the mayor, who, unless there was something untoward about it, surely would have come forward and said, I was with him.
Michelle, it's strange. Let's state first that at that point, Mr. Xakaza was not the mayor.
Right,
he was the MMC for shared corporate services, which included legal and risk at the municipality. And he had spent the night there at that club in the company of Mr. Mfihlo. Not just that he was one of the people in the club. He actually was sitting with Mfihlo for the rest of the night, and then he got murdered shot by these two security guards who are linked to the municipality. They worked for a contractor that is working for the municipality, guarding the bus rapid transit system in Ekurhuleni. And as you have pointed out, for 2 years, the mayor said, the now mayor, he got elected mayor 6 months afterwards. He said absolutely nothing, at least not to the police. And the police had to find out and go and try and interview him. And it appears he resisted that too for a few months.
The 2026 public hearings of the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry are set to resume next Monday. Amongst those who are expected to testify in the coming week is KZN Hawks head Major General Lesetja Senona, who was implicated in allegedly assisting with the facilitation of the now cancelled 360 million rand Medicare tender. At the same time, the assassination of Marius van der Merwe, who was identified as witness D during the hearings last November, prompted a discussion between the Commission, the Presidency and the Justice Ministry about the protection of witnesses and the possible reduction in the levels of transparency. Let's chat to the spokesperson of the Madlanga Inquiry now, Jeremy Michaels, joining us from our studios. Thanks for coming in. I mean, we'll get to the transparency aspect, but let's talk about who else and what else is to be expected in phase 2 of the hearings in 2026.
Good evening, Ziyanda. Very good to be in studio with you. So starting on Monday and over the coming months, the Commission is going to be vigorously pursuing its mandate as outlined in the terms of reference, which of course President Cyril Ramaphosa issued in July last year. And of course the Commission got its work underway with the public hearings on the 17th of September. Of course, you will know that the Commission delivered its interim report to the President on the 17th of December. In the interim, the legal team, the investigators, the Secretariat have been preparing for the start of hearings, as you say, on Monday, this coming Monday, 26 Jan. And I think suffice to say that there's quite a lot in the terms of reference that the Commission was not able to get to in the first 3 months of its work. Of course, there was quite a bit of focus on the allegations by Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, everything that flowed from that, witnesses who came to substantiate and corroborate. We spent quite a bit of time on the Ekhuruleni Metro Police Department and other aspects of the terms of reference, but there's quite a lot in this proclamation that we weren't able to get to.
Like JMPD and Tshwane Metro Police Department, for an example.
Absolutely.
They also form parts of the terms of reference.
Yes, absolutely. And so you can expect that over the coming months, we will be looking into those various aspects, but also there's quite a bit on those themes that I just mentioned that we still need to wrap up.
So, which means you're still going to be straddling between both phases 1 and 2. Speaking of the interim reports, has there been any feedback from the President? Has he sent notes maybe back to the Commission of Inquiry? Because, I mean, some of the allegations that came out were quite damning, and South Africans, you know, want to know whether or not there'll be any action taken.
Ours, Ziyanda, was to deliver the interim report to the President on the 17th of December. Of course, you will know that the terms of reference state very clearly that the Commission must make actionable recommendations to the President. And as you can imagine, the Commission has very diligently been pursuing its mandate accordingly. It is on the President's desk, and I can't speak on behalf of the President, but I think for our part, we are going to be continuing with the work that has been outlined in the terms of reference and as, of course, the South African public expects, because this is such a critical issue which goes to the heart of the safety of our citizens and the rule of law in our country.
How easy is it to be as rigorous as you're saying the Commission is envisaging to be in a phase 2 where you still have to allow people enough time to respond? I mean, we've mentioned Major General Lesetja Senona, who did appear briefly for about 5 minutes or so late last year, and the issue was around witness statements and, you know, whether or not the Commission gives people enough time to respond.
That was on the 26th of November. And as you say, we, in this phase, are likely going to be dealing with witnesses, 1, who are under subpoena, and I'll give you a sense of who's under subpoena right now.
That would be great.
But 2, they are likely to be less than cooperative compared to those witnesses who came in phase one to assist the Commission with its work to provide information for the Commission to pursue those allegations made by Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi. But having said that, of course, the Commission has consistently, and you saw that on display on the 26th of November with Major General Senona having his legal representatives having made representations regarding issues of process and fairness, and we gave them the benefit of the doubt, and Justice Madlanga handed down an order which made clear that by the 16th of January last week, Major General Senona was to submit his witness statement and then appear on the 27th, which is next Tuesday. Now, I can tell you that in the process, or at least in terms of the order that was handed down, Major General Senona had not complied with the order to submit his witness statement by the 16th. And of course, there's been a back and forth between our legal team and his, and that has since been remedied. But this is an example of what the Commission is dealing with. So as much as to your question, we want to be diligent and rigorous.
And within time.
And on time. There are these obstacles that do come up, and of course the legal team deals with those accordingly.
So who can we expect coming up? I mean, Senzo Mchunu was one of those that was said he's going to be returning. South Africans, I'm sure, anticipating someone like Vusimuzi Matlala to be on that list. Anyone else? IPID has a lot to answer for insofar as the Ekurhuleni testimony is concerned, but perhaps you could also add to this very brief list that I've given you.
So, without stating the obvious, we have the likes of Deputy National Commissioner Shadrack Sibia having been served with a subpoena, the likes of the businessman Suleiman Karim, of course, Major General Senona on Tuesday, and there's actually quite a long list of individuals who have been subpoenaed, but in addition to that, in addition to the 40 or so witnesses who appeared before the Commission last year, of course, again, the distinction between those who appeared, and there were 28 of them who appeared in phase one, the remainder in phase two, but there are going to be dozens of witnesses appearing before the Commission over the coming months.
So in terms of now this issue around how people contact you, because there are some legal teams that have accused you as the Commission of taking time to respond or not even responding to them. Perhaps even if you could share the details of how people are actually able to reach you, but also how are you able to distill what is important and what is not, because I'm sure you've had quite a sizable amount of response ever since the start of the Commission.
Yeah, absolutely, Ziyanda. I think, one, it's important to understand or recall that the Commission, right at the outset, at our very first media conference, which I think was on the 28th of July last year, made clear that we are going to put in place a process by which the public can access the Commission. And when I say the public, I mean anyone. People who want to offer the Commission information, they may not necessarily want to appear as witnesses. People who do want to appear as witnesses can make submissions. And at our next immediate press conference, we then set out issued details of the Commission's hotline. So the best way to contact the Commission is via that hotline. Our website has the details, and for those who are struggling to send us emails, you know what I'm talking about. They must spell properly. They must take care to spell the email address properly, but The hotline's details are 0800 111 369, and then the email address is Madlanga Commission @behonest.co.za. Again, the details are publicly available on the web. Google, copy, and paste accurately.
Duly noted, I'm sure. Those who are still maybe wanting to reach out will do so. And then to this, you know, Jeremy, the last day of public hearings ending off on a very tragic note with the murder of Marius van der Merwe. And there was lots of talk and pleas, especially from Justice Minister Mamoloko Kubai, to say that there may have to be a reduction in the levels of transparency. What has been the conclusion of those discussions between the Commission, the Presidency, and the Justice Ministry?
So, Marius van der Merwe was assassinated tragically in front of his family, his wife and his 2 kids, on the 5th of December, that night of the last public hearings of the Commission. I should say very clearly that the Commission is not going to be intimidated. But of course, the issue of witness safety and protection is a very sensitive issue. We met and we did say publicly that the Commission met with the NatJoints, the Security and Intelligence Structure, national structure. And I can't get into minute detail because obviously these are sensitive issues that involve the protection of witnesses and also the Commission staff. But suffice to say that with every witness who appeared before the Commission last year and, of course, who is going to appear before the Commission this year, we are going through a very careful assessment process, threat and risk analyses, to ensure that the Commission offers appropriately the protection that we provide. And as I say, I won't get into that detail.
But does it mean that you'll be reducing how much we as South Africans get to witness when people testify? In other words, more of the testimony is likely to be in camera than it is to be out there in public?
I just want to wrap up that very important point.
Yeah.
The Commission can't force individuals to take the protection that we offer. That was just the last point I wanted to make. And obviously, individuals who know what the danger is, if there was anyone who before the 5th of December, before the assassination of Marius van der Merwe, doubted the risk that's involved and the danger that's involved in the work of the Commission, I think they would have understood that on the night of 5 December. But to answer your question, of course, Justice Madlanga had also, at the outset, at the very first media briefing, said that the Commission is committed to ensuring that the public has as much access as possible. Now, remember, there was the whole issue around in-camera, the Commission's evidence leaders had wanted to take specific witnesses in camera.
Yes.
There were media organizations who brought an application to oppose that. There was an agreement that was reached. Notwithstanding that, because in any event, the Commission is committed to ensuring that South Africans has as much access as possible to the proceedings. But we will make a case-by-case basis, based analysis of the risk that is involved, and where appropriate, as you may see this coming week, witnesses may appear off-camera, as has happened before.
Yeah.
We may have completely in-camera hearings, but that is a call that the Commission and Justice Madlanga specifically will make on a case-by-case basis, as I say.
Jeremy Michaels, thank you very much for your time. Spokesperson for the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. To this now, in a letter issued to NEC members, provincial, regional and branch secretaries, the leagues and military veterans, ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula reminds all and sundry that no structure must engage in leadership contestations ahead of the 2027 National Conference. Now, he issued a letter and has read out the Riot Act to those members who are actively lobbying for who should become the party's president by the time it hosts its elective conference next year. This past weekend, the Sunday World published a splash across its papers where it reported that lobbyists began printing thousands of T-shirts brandishing the name of business tycoon Patrice Motsepe. But while it seems like there are people keen on Motsepe throwing his name into the ring as recently as this past October, the man himself vehemently denied wanting to take over the reins in the top post within the ANC.
The Editors Forum, I don't know when last was I here, 5 years ago, asked me, just like the question I was asked 20 years ago. You know, somebody sent me a clip. Tokyo was on 702, and they asked Tokyo on 702, what are your thoughts on the rumors that are going around that Patrice is going to get involved in politics? And I'd forgotten what I said 20 years ago. But Tokyo remembered. Tokyo remembers many things. and Tokyo says that, and I'd forgotten that, when they asked me this question, I was the president of Black Business. We just united Black and White Business. We formed BUSA. And they asked me, will you get into politics? And what I said at the time is, I'm not mad. And the issue was, are you saying that politics are for mad people? I said, I'm not mad. So Tokyo said on 702, I mean, I don't know where all these rumors come from, because 20 years ago, he said that he's not mad. And they asked Tokyo, was he right? Tokyo said, most probably he may have been right. But what I'm saying, and 5 years ago, the last time I had the honor of being with this important institution, the same question arose. Will you at some stage go into politics? And the answer I gave then is the same I gave a few weeks ago. I don't have to enter into politics to make the contribution I have to.
So that was Patrice Motsepe speaking during a SANAF event sometime last year. And now, DA leader John Steenhuisen has dismissed the allegations made by the party's former finance chair, Deon George, and any insinuation that there's a leadership crisis. Steenhuisen says the removal of George from the Forestries, Fisheries and Environment Ministry formed part of his prerogative as a party leader to make changes to the organization's deployments in the government. He adds that there's no public spat between them, and the Federal Legal Commission has also since cleared him of any wrongdoing when it comes to the alleged misappropriation of the DA's credit card.
But I don't understand what the spat is. There's no spat. As the leader of the party, I exercise my rights to make changes to the executive, exactly as Mayor Hill Lewis has done on 3 occasions, exactly as Premier Windy has done on 2 occasions, and it's exactly as Mayor Mzamanga, Mayor Silius Brink, Mayor Helen Ziller, Premier Helen Ziller made changes to the executive. I made a change to my executive, as is my right in terms of the party. So this is not a spat. This is, I would say, a fallout from a political decision that was made. It's not a spat. I don't get involved in spats. But I'm not really allowed to go into detail on this because of the federal executive injunction.
Coming up after this, we take you to Davos, where our anchor Arabile Gumede will reflect on the week-long deliberations at the World Economic Forum, which concluded on Friday. Stay with us. President Cyril Ramaphosa has distanced South Africa from the decision to have Iran participate in the sea phase of the recent Will for Peace naval exercises. The Middle Eastern country's participation has sparked an outcry over Ramaphosa, over their alleged human rights abuses, and this has come from the DA and other quarters in society. Now, Ramaphosa was earlier this week speaking on the sidelines of the Basic Education Lekgotla this week.
What happened was that we did raise with China the issue of Iran, and said that it would be best that they should withdraw and not participate. And having done so, many engagements happened, and in the course of it all, we realized that we needed more information, and that is why we've constituted a board of inquiry that is going to look very closely into what happened, how it happened, and what steps we now need to take. But more than that, we also need to see the extent to which we ourselves, even as we are not leaders and arrangers of some of these exercises, can take proactive action about certain things, participants and all that. So it is a matter that everyone in defense and in government is seized with at the moment. We rather tend to want to do things carefully and examine every aspect of everything before just letting out and saying whatever people want to hear on the gallery. So give us an opportunity to do precisely that.
And just to note that my colleague Vuyo Mvoko did try to chase the Defense Ministry to find out, firstly, who's a part of that board of inquiry. Have they begun their work? And it is exactly 7 days since the Defense Ministry made that announcement. What is the status of that particular report? Okay, so moving from one head of state to another, U.S. President Donald Trump has vociferously defended some of the widely condemned decisions he has taken since returning to the White House over a year ago. Addressing decision makers from around the world at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, Trump waxed lyrical about his controversial decisions and performance to date. And that's why we're now going to bring into the conversation our very own Newzroom Afrika anchor, Arabile Gumede, who's had quite the week, a nail-biting, maybe frosty week out in Switzerland, Arabile. Let's start off with some of the most important conversations that have taken place over the last 5 days. Artificial intelligence, geopolitical tensions, that board for peace that has now been instituted by Donald Trump, and perhaps on South Africa's front, our propositioning with the spring Davos returning to South Africa in 2027.
Yeah, look, Ziyanda, there's so many parts of that conversation that we could actually really get into. And maybe let's start on the South Africa front, because all the other geopolitics get so muddied. But to start things off, South Africa really had a good message to tell across this week, right? They needed to tell the story of how good South Africa's economy is becoming. There are reforms that had been put in place that we saw actually bear fruit, one would say. Some of the leaders that we spoke to here had made notice of that. We saw the growth picture get better marginally. We saw the economic and financial picture when it comes to our budget fare a little bit better. We saw that coming, the medium-term budget policy statement in October. Of course, in the coming weeks, we will be talking about the budget for 2026 as well. So that is set to bode well for the economy. On the other side, you had Standard & Poor's managing to rate South Africa a little bit higher, so an upgrade in our credit rating, which means that we pay slightly less for our debt. We're viewed slightly better by international investors. Yes, there is still room for a lot more work, but it means that the trajectory, hopefully, is in an upward direction, the positive movement that South Africa has wanted. And that was the story that was being told here, including things like getting off that FATF grey listing, actually. So that FATF grey listing was so important because it had so many risks bearing. And on the other side, you then also had that risk element that the EU had been talking about in terms of visiting South Africa. On the international front, indeed, Donald Trump stealing the spotlight. Wednesday was the day when he addressed the World Economic Forum here in Davos, Switzerland. He made many allegations, many suppositions, and also quite a few animated gestures towards some of the leaders across Europe, across the rest of the world. And we had seen leaders from Europe, even the Canadian Prime Minister, being vehement and finally finding their voice and saying we cannot stand with Donald Trump at this time. So much still in store, and I'll touch on that in just a moment. But as things closed off a little bit here at the World Economic Forum, this is actually what we heard then from leaders of the IMF, that's Kristalina Georgieva. We also heard from the World Trade Organization, the WTO's Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, as well then as the ECB's own Madam Christine Lagarde, who then spoke just about being able to leave the globe behind when the world is shifting. That is not what they're hoping for. Just listen to Kristalina as well as Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala.
Do not fall into complacency. Growth is not strong enough. And because it is not strong enough, the debt that is hanging on our necks, that is reaching 100% of GDP, is going to be very heavy burden. So, yes, more attention to growth. Yes, more attention to those that are falling off the wagon, and we are kind of losing sight of them.
We shouldn't forget the rest of the world. Because we have also a demographic problem in those parts of the world where the innovation and the boom is happening. And whilst we focus on maybe the drugs that are needed in those areas, if we neglect the rest of the world, we don't know what's going to happen there. That could also stand up and bite us. Remember also that these are the future markets. So Africa will be 2.5 billion people, 800 million of them will be middle class by 2050, and 1 in 4 Africans will be, 25% of the world's labor force. So they are also the markets of the future. So for those two reasons, emerging markets and poorer countries or poorer parts of the world now, the markets of the future.
Arabile Kumete, we'll have to leave it there for now, but I know we're still going to have to debrief when you come back home, which is hopefully soon. In particular, also with that speech by the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney. I think his speech is going to be one for the books and that many world leaders are going to be mulling on. Thank you very much for your time, Arabile Kumete, there, coming to us live from Davos in Switzerland. All right, so that's how we wrap things up. And in the coming days, as we've already been speaking, we will be heading to the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry on Monday. You can also anticipate that matter involving Ace Magashula's former personal assistant, Morwadi Cholota, to also resume in the Bloemfontein High Court, the Concourt ruling on who exactly has jurisdiction when it comes to issuing extradition issues, but also an alert coming from Action SA. They have a big announcement in the coming week about merging with 2 political parties, probably gearing up for the local government elections. And of course, that Nkabinde inquiry ending off on a fiery note with Shamela Butoi, the retiring NDPP, walking out of those proceedings. What will happen to her testimony? So all of those stories coming up in the next week. So do stay tuned to Newzroom Afrika channel 405. But for now, it's goodbye. Thank you for watching.